Hey, Sam. You need more water.
All right. And welcome everyone to Monday's Bizapalooza chat. I'm your host, Ivana Taylor. Today we are going to get plugged into one of my favorite topics, and that is comedy and improv and how you can use it in your business. So for that, you know me, I'm always out there looking for experts, and today's expert came to us from our community member, Charles Franklin, who's an avid reader, read and reviewed this awesome book, and we've got the author here with us today. It's Bob Culhan, comedian extraordinaire and author of Getting to Yes And.
That would be the book.
That would be the book. So I want to welcome you to our Bizapalooza chat.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so I'm going to share something with you, and I don't know if I should or I shouldn't, right? So I've always been interested in comedy, not to be a comedian per se, but I've always been fascinated by the way the comedians look at the world. Mm-hmm. So that is what I think is really interesting. And so I had the opportunity to take not an improv class, but a comedy class here in Cleveland, mm-hmm. At the Improv. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is I don't know how much I learned or got for what I was looking for, because I think comedians have a very, very specific way of looking at the world.
Yes.
Is that what's going on? Talk a little bit about that. How do comedians look at the world that maybe the rest of us can possibly maybe learn? I know we can't be as good as the rest of you guys, but maybe there's something we can get out of it.
Well, all right, I'm going to reverse order this whole thing and say anybody, you're pure potential. You can be as good as anybody else out there. And for most people, it takes just a lot of work and drive and passion and tenacity, and you can rise through the ranks and at least be the best you can be in that specific art form, no matter what or how the art of comedy manifests itself. So I think one of the things that comedians do really well at is bring the best of themselves out. They value their unique perspective, the lens through which they see the world, and put it front and center unapologetically, saying to whatever audience that this is me, this is my perspective, and I'm not going to pander and I'm not going to placate. I'm just going to bring it to the table. If you like it, you like it. And if you don't, you don't. And I think a lot of people actually could benefit from that type of confidence to say, this is my unique perspective, and I'm going to share this with you and not worry about the consequence of it. Rather, I'm going to say that my perspective is as valid as your perspective, and together we'll find a common perspective. And that's really as well where the marriage between a comedian and the audience takes place, that ground that everybody agrees, maybe not even on that singular perspective, they at least agree to hear each other and listen to each other and communicate with each other and relax and have fun. And in doing so, in whatever capacity, the comedian is actually collaborating with the audience. They're working together as one team.
That's what makes it so fascinating. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, and believe me, we will, talk a little bit about how you got started. When did you first realize that you were funny? Oldest question like ever asked.
Sure, yeah. Well, I actually go to a Billy Crystal type of quote, which is, I was never the class clown. I was the class comedian. That I had good grades, and I was in junior high school, a bit of an athlete as well. So there was this common area of drive and focus that I had, and the ability to connect in the moment and pull out the comedic elements of any situation, regardless of how pressure-filled or stressful it was something inherent inside of me. And so I was that funny kid who was also smart and also athletic, and that allowed me to position myself in a strange way in the talent shows. So I understood that I was a funny guy, and I knew that this was interesting to me, making people laugh, and something I wanted to do. And when other people in high school had their talent, they did pom-pom routine, the band, or even the teacher band would get up on stage. Rather than get up on stage with a proper 3-5 minute block, I asked to fill in the gap in between the different scenes and in between the different real acts. And so I wasn't an MC per se. I was just more of a show runner, rather the runner of a show, that I was just that person filling in the dead time in between the real acts. And that really got me enough stage time that the theater bug bit me. And then from there, the pursuit of improv was on.
So talk a little bit about how you got to the connection from the pursuit of improv, because that's usually how life is, right? You talked about collaboration, you talked about even, and I love this little thing you talked about, dealing with pressure in a certain way, right? So when did you first make the connection between comedy and business?
Well, I got a business degree. My undergrad degree is in business, and what I say very tongue-in-cheek is, appropriately enough, I got a BS in business. And that was my only official collegiate experience or formal education. The rest of it's just from the School of Hard Knocks. So after I graduated business, I was a good, solid businessman and focused on guerrilla marketing, won a couple of awards for it actually in Chicago. And if you jump backwards, though, before college, after I left high school, when I was in college, my freshman year at Illinois State University, I read an article, local girl doing good in Chicago. So I tracked her down and said, how do I do this? And she said, go study at the Players Workshop at the Second City. So this was the training center for the Second City before there was a training center for the Second City. And so I started studying there. And then I finished up my college degree with an undergrad in marketing, entered the world of business, and was very good at that. And then as the company for whom I was working was imploding, they were very successful and just couldn't keep the clients coming. And so for a number of reasons, the company was imploding. All of us had to spread out, and rather than go into business again, and I was headhunted pretty significantly in Chicago into specifically marketing and advertising and PR promotions. I left the business world completely, started studying improvisation from the people who literally created the art of improvisation in its current state before they passed away, and did everything in my power for about a half a decade not to get back into business. I was a nanny. I hauled sheetrocks. I was on top of houses doing roofing stuff. I would do whatever anybody paid me cash in hand to do, as long as I didn't have to get back into business. And then after, like I said, about 5 years of that, I was so tired, living paycheck to paycheck and borderline losing. The one good thing I did as a businessman was purchase a condo in Chicago, and I was about to default on my mortgage enough times. And then I said, what am I doing? Let's just start putting these two things together. And at that time, I had the opportunity to collaborate on a program for the Duke University Fuqua School of Business. And it was all serendipity happening, that moment of sort of realization and luck and awareness and background all come together at one point. And I put together the first program anywhere in any university that used improvisation in business. That became the first credited program anywhere in the world that focused on improvisation in business. And then my business was off and running from there. And that was 1999. First program started in 2000, January.
Wow. And, you know, I think that's really interesting, because one of the things you talk about in the book is this idea of improv as a skill or a capability that you would use under pressure. You're talking about like SEAL teams, these highly performing teams who perform under pressure. I tend to look at improv or performing under pressure as like real being good at thinking on your feet. And I think I suck at thinking on my feet. So how did you get to that insight? What did you learn from that? And what could we learn from that?
Well, okay, so in times of risk, uncertainty, stress, crisis, people fall back on their most overlearned and overused behaviors. You know, it's a default mechanism we have as humans that when the excrement's hitting the oscillator, we just go to what's most comfortable for us. And then knowing that really improvisation for a lot of people is just making things up on the fly, or what happens when the excrement's hitting the oscillator, that point that you have to make decisions, contingency A and B fall through. So now like, I'll just put everything together. It's really a trained art form. You learn a set of language, principles, practices, routines, accountability practices, and you put those into place to perform improvisation really on any level. So if you really look at the fact that we fall back on our most overused and overlearned behaviors in times of risk and crisis, stress, i.e. pressure, then you can actually take the tenets of improvisation, which you've been using and practicing, and build up your safety zone in your skill set so that when those moments of pressure actually hit, you've widened your safety zone and you have that ability to react, adapt, communicate, be mobile, be flexible, be communicative, listen carefully in the moment. And you're doing it at a higher level than other people who don't practice it at all. So it's something that it's trained, it's learned. Once you understand it, you can practice it and practice and practice it to get better and better.
See, because that is actually one of the first things that we'll be talking about here, which is the whole thing of, do you think you're good at thinking on your feet? Did you feel that? Because I'm sorry, this whole thing of it could be taught versus you're born with it. And then, of course, the answer is always it can be taught. Well, yeah, it can be taught, but you're not going to be as good at it as someone who's just naturally wired a certain way.
Sure.
Right? So talk about this idea of being good at thinking on your feet, right? So like some people, would you say that you were naturally good at thinking on your feet?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so
some people are innately good at
really
or athletics or math or whatever it is. Some people are just really good at communication, the gift of gab, et cetera, et cetera.
You're good at thinking on your feet.
Right? Yes.
Okay, so I suppose this is an unfair question because I think when you're good at something, it's hard for you to pinpoint like how you do it.
Yes, and I think you can at least come close to pinpointing the reasons around why or how you're doing it.
Is that what you did when you went to write the book?
Yeah, to the best of my ability, I tried to unpack the how. That was a massive goal of mine. It was a mandate. It was front and center with Stanford University Press, my publishers. Everyone knew what the overall goal was. I really wanted, to the best of my ability, unpack the how part of that, because there's a lot of great improv books out there, and most of them don't even touch the how. So it becomes theory. It becomes this bigger picture or metaphoric even. And that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to hit the how. So in order to do that,
talk about the very, very first, because that, that first time you're trying to sort of pinpoint what's happening in my head, like right now, that I can tell someone.
Okay, so I think it's important to qualify your point, which is, yes, some people are better at this than others. That's fair. And even the best improvisers that I know, comedic improvisers here in America, no one stops practicing, ever. You stop practicing, you stop performing, you start focusing on this, you stop watching it, then you are not the best anymore. You start slowing down. We look at the human brain the same way athletes look at muscles. If you're really going to operate at peak potential, you have to continue to work it out, because if you don't work it out, it atrophies. And that's the same with improvisation across the board. So really now then, branching away from that qualifier and getting into answering your question of how, for me, it was looking at a level of awareness that a person or an improviser, or in my case, just somebody who does think on their feet very quickly, has to actually have to be present and in the moment to understand the situation, to see the moving pieces of the puzzle in real time, and then have the ability to start putting those pieces in puzzle into place and adapt along the way, so that if one piece isn't working properly, grab another piece and you move another piece. And also part of that as well is just relaxing and having fun. Not being so stressed out to make it work, not being so focused on the end product, rather just saying, all right, I'm confident with who I am, so I can make it work anytime, anywhere, any place, anyone. And it might not be the Y result that you wanted. It could be double X, really close to it, or I just might end up at Z, something you weren't expecting as a whole. So we just have to understand that when you're really putting your best foot forward and doing it to the best of your ability, there's some wiggle room inside of there as well. And that's a confidence that I had as well, just the understanding that ultimately so much of this is just small picture, and it's not it's not life overall. These are small moments in life that do certainly matter, and those small moments make memories overall, right? The most impactful moments we have are the things we remember, not every second of every day, our entire life, unless you're Mary Lou Henner. Most people aren't. I think one person is. I don't know. I have to check my memory on that. So it's really just being comfortable in the moment, observing, focusing, relaxing, and then giving yourself the ability to adapt and have forgiveness for yourself too. When mistakes are made, move on, get past it.
So now talk about like this unpacking the how, because I'm fascinated by this whole thing. Talk about the moment where you like sat down and there was, I don't know, what should it be? Like the most, how do I say this? For example, like I remember when I was taking this improv class and as interesting as it was, I have to say that I didn't feel I'm a tell me how person, right? So I do that for other people, and then I want people to do that for me. So I was trying to put together this bit, but again, I had no clue how these thoughts went. And somewhere in my research, because of course I want to know something, I go online, somebody said, oh, when you're, trying to put a comedy bit together, think about your experiences and then think about like the most extreme, absurd thing that comes to your mind that could happen in that circumstance.
Okay.
Right? Now, I found that to be like really helpful, right? Because I can have an idea of something that really happened, and then I could say, well, what would be the most extreme thing on this?
Right.
And then it got to be funny. That made it funny.
Yes.
Right? So what are some of the things that you had unpacked, and how did you communicate that to people?
All right. Well, for me, I'm hearing two things. So part of me really wants to feast on the comedy side because you keep bringing that up, and
I've been doing
comedy for 23 years. Say that again?
I said, you're a funny guy. That's why you're here.
Yeah, well, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. So for me, just interesting enough, I'm the opposite. I'm already out there. I'm already in cuckoo crazy land. I'm borderline two-dimensional across the board. I'm almost a cartoon from the 1980s. So I find it makes my comedy richer and even more funny when I start dealing with the reality of it, that making every situation very real, even put emotion behind it, not emoting, put emotion into it, context, and build relationships and depth of character or scene or environment that really, that's the layers really create more comedy for me as opposed to the opposite, because I'm already this close to a pratfall right now. So now the business side of it, looking at the business and unpacking the how in business, for me, started with really beginning to understand behavioral psychology. And so you go back to 1999 when I started partnering on that first Duke Fuqua program. I started partnering with behavioral scientists. I wasn't partnering with more improvisers to create this program. I was partnering with academics, and in fact, elite academics at that, in the fields of behavioral psychology and behavioral economics, cognitive psychology, organizational theory. So really understanding the how and why we make decisions in real time. How do we make decisions alone? How do we make decisions alone in a group? How does the group make decisions? The difference between group mind and group think, and really beginning to frame the how we make decisions and why we make decisions in real time, and apply that to what improvisation inherently brings, which is up on your feet, it's interactive, it's dynamic, it's experiential. So putting the cognitive framing around the experiential learning really creates that level of depth that allows me to connect it in a very real way and unpack the how process. So that was the path on how I started really looking to describe and unpack and explain the how to the very best of my ability as transparently as possible.
So what would you say to the listeners that we have right now who have maybe tried to do this but just somehow haven't? And I would put myself in that category.
Tried to do improv?
Try to think on your feet better. Try to be in a business circuit. I bet everyone out there is in the same boat that I'm in. You have a conversation with someone, and like you did biddy, and then it's like over, and you're like, oh, I could have said, I should have said.
Right, the coulda, woulda, shouldas.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Do you have any tips on that?
Yes, and what I think is important to understand, and I'm going to go back to how you and I both approach comedy as an example, that it's subjective. Everything is subjective, and so you're really talking about personality and who you are as a person. So what will work well for one person won't work at all for somebody else. So this is not comedy by the numbers, and just like there's no formula for leadership, for example, there's no single formula for always thinking on your feet. There's a lot of X variables that you define properly in one scenario, and you need to redefine altogether in another scenario. And then there's Y variables that are hanging out there, and AA variables, and there's all sorts of chaos that takes place. So a couple of things that I would say if you're really trying to implement this regularly and become better at thinking on your feet. One, give yourself room. room. This is super important. Give yourself a time, give yourself an environment. A lot of people, there are a number of reasons that keep people from thinking on their feet. And I might actually just spin this around on you, since you said this is something you grapple with. What keeps you from effectively thinking on your feet? What are the barriers, if you will?
I think it's what you said. I think I stress about like wanting to give the right answer, knowing the right answer. Can I answer the question? Do I have the right information? I mean, just to like give you a real explanation. I had a client that I did a lot of research for, right? And I learned after a couple phone calls that every time they called me, they would want like some kind of an answer from like a survey thing that we did. And usually they wanted to 3 decimal places, which meant that when they would call me, I would like not answer the phone. What I would do is open the survey thing, take a look at all the data and have it in front of me. And then I would call them back. Now that's generally not my natural way of being. I'm a very spontaneous person and so on and so forth, but that's what gets in my way.
Yes. Okay. So there's a couple of things I heard from that. And I think some of it's, or if not, a lot of it's rooted in judgment. So you think you have to have the right answer, and you think you have to have all these numbers, and there's a right versus wrong. So that means there's repercussions that take place if you are not right and you are wrong. So what do you do with that? So when I started saying before, you have to give yourself time, that area, that place to not worry, not stress, not feel the burden of it, not be tense, not worry about judgment, not right or internal judgment. I'm worried about what somebody's going to say if I don't have the answers, or if it isn't 100% right. Not worry about external judgment, what they're actually going to say. So we're talking about a specific block of time in which is good for you to practice this. The stakes are low, and you deliberately go in with the mindset, I'm going to be adaptable. I'm going to be flexible. I'm going to think on my feet. I'm going to be nimble. I'm going to be ready for anything. I want to respond. I want to react. I'm going to communicate, whether it's verbal or nonverbal communication. I'm definitely going to be present and in the moment at a high level. And that then will give you a base, like a base knowledge of how to do it. It's going to help your core decision-making as well, your intuitive decision-making, your instinctual decision-making, still improv. So this repetition of behavior, this will become training, which will then widen your base and allow you to have comfort in this, which then means in times of real stress, or you have this real client, you put yourself in a better position to succeed because you've been practicing this for a while as well.
So in essence, you're just saying, calm down, calm your tits, as my friends like to say. Calm down.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
Worrying.
I think it's breathe. Yes. I cannot stress that one enough. If you don't breathe, what happens?
Then you die.
Yeah, very often, or you'll pass out anyway, and your body will take over and say like, hey, dummy, this is what you're supposed to do. This is part of how we survive. So yeah, take a deep breath, relax a little bit, and just observe. And then once again, practice. That's something that a lot of people just don't think about. They think,
what are you practicing exactly? I mean, right? Like even this moment, this conversation that we're having, I'm going to tell you, part of my mind is thinking, what can I do to like make this funny? What could I, it's like the stuff that you're not saying, the stuff that you're like thinking about while the other person is talking, you're multitasking, blah, blah. But then I'm thinking like, you know what I'm saying? It's sort of like, in essence, this could be practice, but I don't know what to do.
Yes. Okay. So, right. So, all right. Many things. One, know your own behaviors. That's what I would say. Really start with a clear assessment of who you are as a person and where you struggle with this. And then you can put that front and center of, all right, these are the challenges I'm going to face. This is the habit or the routines that I've developed in my life that have created these habits that are not necessarily great habits as they relate to just being present and thinking on your feet at a high level. I get caught in my head. I think about it. I need to be funny. I need to be clever. I need to be creative. Instead of just relaxing, they're like, yeah, am I funny? Am I clever? Am I creative? I don't know. We'll find out soon enough. I'll probably watch this. Who knows? Then again, practice. I can't stress that enough, that, whether you got to relax your tits or relax other organs, other body parts, or how do you relate in that position? Because it's easy to succeed when things are not stressful. So you're really practicing a skill set related to how to succeed when things are stressful, and you actually do need to be funny, or you do need to bring the answers at a very high level. And again, so much of that is based in confidence, saying, I know how to do this. I can get there. Is it going to be perfect?
So just saying there's really no reason why you should not be confident.
Yes. If you practice it enough times, then you should be confident in it. If you're not practicing, then yeah, you've probably increased the probability that you're not going to be confident.
So I'm going to kind of shift topics a little bit. I sort of want to know, because you're doing these workshops and you are, look at this connection between collaboration and improv. Where do you find inspiration? Where do you find your, should I ask, material? Because you said that you do it like it to you. You like to bring things down to real life. Give me an example.
All right, so these are, again, two separate roads that we're on, the comedy side and the business.
I want to go to the comedy side.
All right, so we're focused on the comedy side. Ariel, where do I find comedy? Oddly, I am certainly one of those people that finds comedy in tragedy. And I'm not talking about necessarily big global tragedy or something that wipes the soul from somebody or something like that. I'm talking about somebody who walks into a door, somebody who's not really taking place. That Schadenfreude type of like, no one really got hurt, and that was pretty funny.
Pie in the face kind of stuff.
Yes. Now, what I do, though, is kind of take that element and then look at it from the after effect of the person who did it. So I said walk into a door. Let's say it's you're walking, you're in a high stakes situation. Boom, you hit a door and it's a glass door, and it's perfectly Windexed. They did a great job. You didn't even know it's there. It looks like a screen. The person next to you walks through the open side of it. You hit that side. Now, what I think is most interesting in that, first is the impact of the door, right? It's watching the after effect. What does that person do after that instant takes place? That to me is super interesting. And that to me can really start like showing layers of who somebody is. Do they get embarrassed? Is it a nosebleed? Do they fall over? Do they just walk away? What does that tell you, and how do they recover? Then that creates almost a backstory, if you will. Then you could start moving forward from there.
That's an awesome tip. That is an awesome tip. Right? We were talking about walking into a door, and then as you were when you said that moment after, the first thing I thought of is, let's say you're walking and then you trip on the crack in the sidewalk, and like I would be one of the people that would be like, oh, how did that happen? What jumped up to grab my foot? Right? Like it wasn't me.
Yeah. That's what some people do too. They turn around like they'll blame the crack.
Yeah, right.
Who put that there?
Yes, that look, right?
What I do is start bounding forward. Even if I fall, I just kind of like try to roll it off and give a wave. I'm like, hey.
Yeah, so that's so true, right? And that kind of shows about who you are, even in, to blip back to the parallel side about the business, is we all make mistakes in business.
Yes.
That's going to happen. That's the walking into the door, right?
Yes. Well, potentially, yes.
Well, yeah, and I heard a lot of, I was at a conference and they had this thing, which I hate, which is, talk about your most embarrassing moment. And let me tell you, these CEOs and some of the people that were the most successful had the best embarrassing moments.
Yes.
And I'm like, girl, you are not living. I'm like, I don't know what my most embarrassing moment is.
There's a phrase in improvisation, which is there's no mistakes. Now, this is more related to comedic improvisation, meaning specifically, there is no mistakes in improv if you react to it and adapt to it and incorporate it as part of it. In other words, if by just simply addressing it in some capacity, not calling someone out or calling it out at all, because that's super easy and very dangerous, you just you justify it by reacting to it, and that turns into a heightening mechanism from the event itself and becomes funnier and funnier. So that's where there's no mistakes comes from. Now, in truth, that doesn't really relate so well in real life across the board, let alone in business. So what is important to understand is that risk-taking is needed, and so we're talking about strategic failure, strategic mistakes, not the fact that you walked into the door. It's if you walked into the door 2 or 3 more times after that and you didn't learn from the fact that there's a door right here and you just keep hitting it over and over. That's not great mistakes. You know, those aren't great mistakes. That's not great failure. You're not learning from failure. That's repeated failure. Could be very dangerous. If you do it once, though, and you clean it up and you put a big sign there, it says, do not walk here, and put some horses around it so other people can't hurt themselves as well, and you take care of it, and you learn from it and communicate it in different capacities and look at different ways to show lighting on it, maybe put some kind of hologram on it. Now you're using it for marketing purposes. Well, that's a mistake, and you learn from it and capitalize off of it, and you did it for the greater good as well. And that, to me, is how it links over to business as well, that you can make mistakes in business. In fact, there's tons and tons of support around this, that mistakes are needed. Failure is needed in business. That's how innovation comes about. That's where creativity comes about. That's so much about the creative thinking process evolves in this, and the way that evolution as a whole takes place and how we respond to new technologies, etc. However, that's thoughtful risk-taking, and that's strategic failure, and learning from it strategically to get better in the future and use it to innovate, use it to push the envelope.
Okay, so I have to ask you, because this is like the next obvious question. What have been some of your most embarrassing moments, and what are some of the things that you've learned? You can talk comedy, you can talk business, you can talk both.
Well, all right. I'll give you two quick ones, okay? Because I don't know. I'm surprised my face isn't like still red from the amount of embarrassing experiences I've had in my life. You know, over and over and over again. All right, so an embarrassing one for me, comedically, there was the Del Close Awards, a group that I was in, founded, is still in it. Baby Wants Candy. We do hour-long, completely improvised musicals with a full band. We created in Chicago at the Improv Olympic Theater the Del Awards, named after the founding guru of the Improv Olympic, Del Close, who is credited for creating modern-day improv. And so we created these awards to honor him and have some fun inside. And it was the first time we did the awards, and it was the award for most walk-ons or something like that. So it's not really an award you want if you're walking in a lot of scenes. You know, you're kind of known for stealing other people's thunder. And there was a show downstairs called Zumpf that had Miles Stroth in it and Dan Bacadal. And Dan's pretty famous right now in the entertainment world. Been in a lot of different things, including Veep. And they had a show going on. I knew Miles very, very well. I didn't know Dan that well. And Miles won the award. And again, Baby created the awards. We were hosting it. I actually was hosting that specific award. And Miles was on stage downstairs where the award ceremony was upstairs. So I left the award ceremony to go give the award for most walk-ons in a show that was going on and walking on his show. Well, Miles and I had already established a great relationship. Dan and I never even met before. So to Miles, it was a funny bit. And, you know, he played along and took it. And to Dan, it was a very insulting thing. And afterwards, I was very embarrassed. I was very inebriated as well. So I was very embarrassed and humble. And since then, of course, Dan and I have become good buddies. However, that wasn't necessarily the best moment of my life. Yet I was thinking it was funny, and I was taking advantage of the situation. Would I do it again now? No, probably not.
That's what I was going to ask. What did you, I see so many great parallels in that story, both for comedy and for business, right? I mean, one of the things that I hear in that is that, you know, like, you don't know how someone's going to react to something. You think it's funny, and you don't know. I mean, from the marketing perspective, you know, we deal with that all the time. There are things we think are hysterical, right? And I can imagine, like, when those people were doing the Pepsi ad or whatever, they thought it was like the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then, you know, you don't know how it's going to land for other people. So what did you learn out of that you kind of take with you?
Don't walk on other people's shows unless you know them both really well. Actually, you know what I would start with is humility, to be honest with you. I think one of the reasons why Dan and I became good buddies after the fact was that right away I was sorry, I was humble. I didn't throw it back in his face like, this is the award. Yeah, I've been here longer. I've done all this stuff, and you're kind of new here, so you should really be paying attention to me. I had an audience follow me down too, and so they disrupted the show. So I wasn't showing respect for their art and what was going on at that specific time. Also, though, I would say that your brand is really the consistency of your behavior and how people perceive that behavior over a longer period of time. So fortunately, my reputation was super strong at the Improv Olympic at that time. So even though he accepted my apology in the moment, he certainly asked about me and found out that I wasn't a big ass and was an okay guy. And so the consistency of my behavior before that really benefited me, because at that specific time when I did make a pretty grievous mistake, I was able to recover from it.
But, you know, sometimes these things that appear as mistakes could actually end up being opportunities. So this that occurred as a mistake, you know, you had the opportunity to meet another person. And I think as a comedian, it's got to be hard to walk that line between, right? It's risk versus reward.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And we've seen it often lately that it's the job of a comedian.
Right? That's what I learned out of that most embarrassing moment exercise. I'm like, wow, I never thought I was this risk averse.
Yeah, a lot of people are. A lot of people who think that they're great risk takers really aren't great risk takers for a number of different reasons. And I think there's time and a place for it. And certainly if you've done a good job setting yourself up for success, if you do err or when you do err, you can recover from it. And that's really what we're talking about in the long run when it comes to improvisation. It's the ability to recover from the mistake, recover from the failure, recover from the error. What did you learn? What can you do? How can you communicate it? What structure can you put up to move forward in the future so that it doesn't happen again, et cetera. And that, and my business failure one, it probably would go down an equally long tangent. So I'm going to defer back to you if you want to stay on point or if you want to go on a journey.
Well, I guess I want to ask, let's talk a little bit about some of the few things that are in the book. Let's jump over to that for just a brief moment or three. So,
sure.
One of my the whole improv thing of yes and I actually do a lot of other communications training where they say replace but
accept and oh yes.
Right. So like let's say for example, I would love to go to Hawaii, but I don't have enough money. So that basically says you ain't going to Hawaii. Right? Whereas if you would say yes, I would love to go to Hawaii and I don't have enough money, that sort of is a statement of fact and you can do something with that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now you're highlighting perfectly the difference between yes, but and yes, and, or even but and. And for me, it's about the connotation. So I would like to go to Hawaii, but I don't have enough money really insinuates that you're not going to go to Hawaii more than is a directive, right? I'd like to go to Hawaii and I don't have enough money implies that there's more. There's an ellipses after I don't have enough money. You're going to get that money. So it lends itself, the connotation is negative versus positive, a stopping point versus forward movement. In but, of course, being negative and a stopping point and being positive in a forward movement.
And that's that is the one and only improv rule I know, right? And I can, right? It's an awesome rule. It's transformative, really.
Yes.
You know, but there've got to be some other ones. And Charles is in the chat, but I have not read the book. So you will have to educate me on what are some of the other tips and tricks from improv that we can really use to transform our conversations.
All right. Hi, Charles. Thanks for setting this up. All right. So let's first focus on yes and, because I just as a communication tool, it shouldn't be dismissed because that's just one area. And you can't not really underscore the impact of yes and versus yes but enough. It's absolutely enormous. And as a communication tool, though, it's actually a way to focus and slow the brain down. So if you just focus on yes anding somebody in their conversations, sure, it has that sort of feeling of agreement and forward movement. However, if you're really going to do it, you have to listen attentively to what somebody's saying, intensely. Pick up on nonverbal communication, pick up on the verbal communication, and build on that. So that building on it, which is the common definition of yes and, yes is acceptance and is building on it, isn't necessarily always agreement. What that is really is a reaction to what somebody says. So you have to slow the brain down to be present in the moment, to listen carefully what somebody says and simply react to what they say as well. So now it's a way to be present. It's a way to be in the moment. When used enough times, really, and focusing on self-improvement, just simply using yes and is a direct roadmap to achieve mindfulness. That's important to underscore, not just understand the concept of mindfulness, actually achieve mindfulness for those very same reasons. We're talking about slowing this incredibly powerful tool, the human brain, down to a baby's beginning to crawl and move its body type of forward progress, inch by inch, millimeter by millimeter. Every little movement counts from yourself and other people. And that is a great way to take this powerful tool, which most people push out. I got to go everywhere. I have to run as fast as I can. I have to move as rapidly as possible. I have to think about these answers and think about these questions. And in fact, go the opposite direction so that you're so focused and you're so present and you're in the moment that you can simply react. And in doing so, clarity starts to take place. I liken this quite often, great improvisation, and I'll stick specifically with yes and as a tool to be present and in the moment, to the Matrix. The first one. You ever see the good Matrix?
Yes.
You know when Keanu Reeves gets shot and the bullet's whizzing at him, and you could see the ripples behind the bullet, and he's whizzing back, and the fiber by fiber pops open, a little pop of blood comes out. That's great improv. Great improvisation is the ability to see the ripples behind the moving bullet as it's passing you. That's how slow the brain has to. Actually, it's not slow. You're just redirecting this energy instead of moving fast and getting to the next thing, to understand that everything in front of you is very, very important to you. And in doing so, you can strengthen relationships, because improvisation is inherently a communication-based art form. So we're talking to each other, we're listening to each other, we're reacting and adapting to each other. And by extension, as a communication-based art form, especially in the creation model, it's a collaborative art form. So it's communication and collaboration. And since we're creating in the moment, it's inherently creative. So it focuses on creativity. And if you're driving to a specific outcome with that creativity, it's a model for innovation as well, whether the outcome is a show or communication or a actual product. So now you're hitting some of the end goals that we can focus on. Once again, we haven't even left yes and at this point.
It's that
so,
big.
And
right?
this is still the tip of the iceberg for that 2-word phrase.
It's the only one I remember. And I'm like, there got to be other ones.
If you're I can give you a whole bunch of them. Be present in the moment, certainly one of them. Listen, make your partners look better than you. If you're really focusing on making everybody else look better than you, then everyone's focusing on the same common thing, which is each other. And in doing so, every person is more important than the product, the process. Actually, the product and process become more important than any person, because we're not thinking about yourselves. We're not thinking about how to be funny or how to grandstand or take the spotlight. You're just trying to make the show more important, or the people around you more important. Be adaptive. Be in the moment. Yeah, there's so many rules to improvisation. I'm going to go back to something, though, that my mentor, Martin DeMont, great guy. He created the Second City Training Center, or co-created with Sheldon Patinkin. Martin used to say, "You are pure potential." So now it's a matter of framing. So rather than focusing on what we can't do, you focus on what we can do and how to get it to the next level. And that's not just on stage now. Let's push it over to the book, or more specifically what the book was written for, business, and by extension, life. Because as you mentioned in the book, we're not just touching upon business people. We talked to Navy SEALs, how they used improvisation. And by the way, that last phrase, when I was talking about the bullet whizzing by and the blood and the slow motion, the ripples behind it, the phrase in improvisation is think slow to move fast. Think slow to move fast. The Navy SEALs say slow is fast. And that was a common, in just talking to each other, I said that to him. He goes, well, we have a very similar phrase. And that's to say, when you're moving slow and you're on point and you're connected with each other, then you're going to move a lot faster than people who are running with no focus, no clarity, no awareness.
That's intense. That's intense. But you know, it occurred to me that even with all of that, that's why the yes and is one that's so popular. It seems that all the other ones are connected to it. It's almost like it's at the center, right? Being present, being mindful, you know, all of these things are some, if you just do the yes and I think the other one that you said that was the other one, making your partner look good.
Yes.
Right? Making them, because I remember in my class when we did play with improv, there were people where it's almost like our default to be focused on ourselves, right? Whereas if you, and when you do that, like you said, it just stops. It just stops. Whereas if you're focused on what can I say that's going to give that person something to say? I don't know if that's correct thinking, but I think
it is.
Right? Is that the one you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go to a Susan Messingism. So if anybody out there is an improv nerd and those other names didn't resonate, which they should have, I mean, they're talking about some legends in improv across the board. Susan is definitely in that same category. And she would say that if you're only thinking about yourself and what you're going to say next, you're a selfish asshole. That's it. You don't care about anybody else. Go do something solo, like stand-up. Great art form. That's really more focused on the individual, and it's done through routine. Go practice doing something like that, because improvisation is a team sport, and you should be focusing on each other. So constantly, to your point, you should be looking to bump the ball up so other people can spike it down. If somebody says something that doesn't make sense, you do whatever it takes to make them look like a rock star, even if it means you sacrifice your own drive, you sacrifice your own ideas to make the ideas of somebody else work. Because if everybody's doing that, once again, then it's not your idea and my idea and Charles' idea, it's our idea. The idea that the team is more important than the person, the product, the process is more important than an individual. And in understanding this, a couple of things happen. One, the collective consciousness of the team outweighs that of any individual. So we are smarter, more sensitive, empathetic, etc. as a team than any one person inside that team will be. Second is, the worst idea with great support will go much further than the best idea with no support. So those other common things we want in all of our teams, regardless of the outcome of the teamwork, trust and support are inherent in improvisation teams because they're the law of the land. If you do not trust and you do not support to the best of your ability in an improv team, you will not be part of a great improv team, either by your choice or the team's choice. Now, the byproduct of doing these things, though, and this might seem counterintuitive, is by unconditionally supporting everybody around you and performing at the top of your intelligence, another great improv phrase, to help the overall concept, the show, the process succeed, you end up looking like a rock star. Because you don't need to sacrifice your individuality. You don't need to actually sacrifice your intelligence, your drive, your passion. You don't have to sacrifice much at all in order to make everybody else look good. And the best improvisers are the ones who can take the mic when needed and run in a solo way and are willing to give up the mic every single time. They're selfless, they're caring, they're very giving players, they're very supportive players. Those are the best improvisers out there. The ones that know when to take it and more often than not are willing to give it up.
That's so fascinating. It's fascinating to me that you said, you know, you know how it is, like at some point in your life, like, you know, things are different, but then you're like whack on the front of the head moment, right? Like when you said that improvisation is a team sport, whereas stand-up comedy is more of an individual performance. You write, you prep, you know, you're up there sort of on your own. And that had like never occurred to me. Even though I kind of get it and I knew it, it had never ever occurred to me that those are like two different skill sets then, aren't they?
They are. Now, a lot of people don't actually realize that the best improvisational stand-up comedians, you know, they've rehearsed their script, they know it inside and out, and they've performed it hundreds of times probably to get to like HBO, for example, or something like that. The best of them who are improvisational actually use the audience as their team.
Yes, right. So there are, I love to watch comedy. I love it. And it's one of the things I'll notice when I'm like, because I took the class, because I know like how a show is created and how much goes into it and everything is by design and so on and so forth. When people respond, not just to hecklers, but when they're like when they're in their bit. They're in their thing. And I know, because anyone who's done any business presentation, whatever, you have this little slot, like insert something like this here. Right? At least that's what I have. I'm like, insert like something like this here. And then like you have your little modules of things that you could potentially say. But then sometimes people will like randomly point to someone, right? So now they're out of their bit.
Yes. Yes.
At that moment.
Yes.
They are out of their bit and they are having something hysterical happening.
Yes.
And then they freaking go back.
Yes. So let's take your stand-up, right, and look at this as a presentation technique, right? So they're parallel with each other because a lot of presentations are solo. Sometimes they're in small teams. Let's just look at it, expand it so that whatever we're going to say right now in presentation form could be solo or small team, doesn't matter. And then look at the parallel to stand-up. So stand-up, you structure your bits out, you learn your bits, you practice your bits, you work on heightening, you get notes and feedback, you watch other comedians, you adapt, you learn, you practice, so that once you're doing the stand-up, you can respond. Anything becomes a gift and an offer, and you know how to get off track and get back on track, and you're still staying within your 5-minute slot or your 7-minute slot or whatever slot block that they're, before you get the little light in the back, that's time to go, time to wrap it up. Now, presentations. You should learn your material inside and out. You should practice your material incessantly. Again, I'll go back to Susan Messing. Susan used to say that you should be able to perform a monologue. So that's a monologue is a solo presentation of material, right, that you've rehearsed over and over again. You should be able to perform your monologue while inebriated in the shower. Meaning that you are doing something else or washing dishes. You have your mind focused on doing one task, and you're in an altered state of consciousness, and you could still do your monologue verbatim. That's how comfortable you have to be with the material, whether it's stand-up or a monologue or now back to presentations. Because if you're truly that confident in your presentation, you own it. And if you own it, then your voice comes out of it, and they can feel the passion, and you can hear the authenticity inside of it. You can adapt to make it your own at certain points. And then that unexpected thing, which a lot of people fear, the projector breaks down, the technology breaks down, you get that hard curveball question that you weren't expecting before, becomes opportunities rather than challenges, because now it's the opportunity for me to show my base of knowledge. Even if I don't have the answer, I don't have to BS about it. I can say, oh, it's a great question. Let me get back to you on it. If I'm just going to respond to you right now, I would say it's this. I'm not confident that that's 100% correct. Let me do research and get back to you. Otherwise, it's game time. It's any place, anytime with people. Just throw it, pull the carpet out from underneath me, throw the hard curveball question. I've done my homework. I've done my due diligence. Not only material, by the way, in the audience. Know your audience. If you're presenting, know your audience, because if you know that, then you can say the things to them that they want to hear. You can present your material in that unique way that fits in their world and makes sense in their world, which is the base of the book as well, right? Getting to yes and is present this art of improvisation, which I love, married to the world of business, which I also love, and done in a way that makes this group, the people who do not want to be on Saturday Night Live or get on the Daily Show or have their own Comedy Central special, understand it and use it. And by that, I mean the business people.
Well, I got to tell you, when I was in the comedy class, one of the things I thought was fascinating is how many people, because it is not easy to, like, when you see those people on HBO or Netflix or wherever you see them, that has been a long, hard slog for every single one of those people who have sacrificed incredible amounts of everything to be there. The open mics, the free stuff, the MC, the whatever. I get it.
Gigs.
Right? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what is wrong with you people? I have no desire to be on Saturday Night Live. I definitely want to get the skills, but I want to get the skills to be able to do what we're doing now. Mm-hmm. Right? To be able to present in front, to do a keynote or to do whatever. The money's way better there. What is it that drives a comedian to do all of that? Because take me in backstage. What's going on?
Love. I have a buddy of mine, Joe Canale. He and I have kind of gone through the whole thing together, from the times that we were taking classes to now 23 years later. And probably 6 months ago or so, we were on the phone, just talking, catching up. He's in LA now. I'm in New York now. And we guesstimated that we have done around 4,000 live performances a piece, each of us, independently, and together, as we perform a lot together. So 4,000 live performances. The majority of those live performances are not paid. Some of them have been paid. A chunk of them, the extreme majority, though, have not been paid. So we're doing this because we want to do it. So we're talking about intrinsic motivation. We have that desire to do this because for us, improvisation and improvisational comedy, and even relating it over to some stand-up, as I do keynotes, so I do one-man shows, I do stand-up, whatever performance. We do this because we love this and we love performing it and we love making people laugh. So that drive has to come from the heart and the gut. And the mindset is, if you're really performing with the heart and the gut, and I'll extend this now into how I teach business improv as well, then the mind is part of this attachment of heart and gut, because this might be leading here. However, this is creating the strategy and the links, and hopefully in the tail end, the money, the wallet starts getting full as well. Because if the heart's full and you're going with your gut on this thing and the mind is moving in that same direction, then that's three out of the 4 places that are full. Hopefully that last one, the wallet, will get full as well.
So what's the difference between a corporate audience and a comedy club audience?
Well, a comedy club audience wants to laugh. That'll be the quick one. I think they pay money to see comedy. I think they want to laugh. Escapism. Now,
that's a tough audience because of exactly what you said.
Well, is it a comedy club audience is a tough audience, or?
I think so, because like you said, they paid the money to laugh.
Yeah, that's what we're there to do as well. You want to make people laugh. So I have that opposite perspective, I guess, when it also comes to thinking on your feet, that I and also just lots of stage time. I mean, I've just gone through the ringer. I've failed. All of us have failed a bunch. I mean, hard to track that number as well. So you learn from it, you get better, you get much more comfortable with it. The business one, though, that's an interesting one. So what's the difference between the two of them? Question, I would have responded the same way 18 years ago when my company started. Business Improv started. I would have said, do not go in there and talk about making people laugh. Do not make people laugh. Don't even talk about fun. Don't have fun. Let's not worry about the fun right now. And that really actually created the Business Improv brand as well, which led us down that path of the behavioral sciences and academia and all the making strong business links and really getting front and center in front of very tough clients that want return on investment, saying, bring it, we're bringing it back. So you bring it and we'll do this together. Now, 18 years later, fun is a focus in business. It's okay. I mean, think about the .coms and how they've created their work environments and design thinking and the fun stuff and the dress code that we all wear. So the evolution has not become more strict and less comfortable. It's become more comfortable and more casual in the language, and bring your personality. Everybody wants your personality now. So corporate audiences actually now want to laugh. They want to see that personality. And I can tell you without any doubt whatsoever, 18, 15 years ago, maybe even as little as 10 years ago, I don't know that I would have gone in there to some of the groups that I've worked with and been as casual as I am now. And that's not to say that I'm, the company's business improv, not comedy improv for business. Right. So right. I'm still focusing on what I focus on. At the same time, I can certainly let my personality come out. And yeah, that is a huge difference just in that single audience, let alone the fact that the comedy audiences want comedy as an outcome and the business audiences want business takeaways as an outcome.
All right. So we are down to our 2-minute thing. And I know you can do an entire routine then. So you're going to give me 2 answers. What are your final words of wisdom, and where can we get more information?
Okay. Well, my final words of wisdom are try. Just try. Just try to implement these techniques. Do it with your significant others. Do it with your children. They want to play with you. They want to talk with you, of course. Do it with people that you're having troubles with at work. Do it with flight attendants. Do it with bartenders. Practice. Cling to yes and as a practice technique. Use it with everybody. Again, flight attendants, bartenders, strangers on the subway, significant others, children. Cling to that. Where can you find more about this? Well, how about my book? Getting to Yes and the Art of Business Improv from Stanford University Press. You can also follow us on Business Improv on Facebook. You can follow me on Facebook. I got an author page. You can follow us on Twitter at B-I-Z Improv, at Biz Improv, or me at Culhan. Yeah, practice.
Practice, practice. Well, that was so awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And there you have it, another super informative Bizapalooza chat plugging into using improv in your business and maybe a little bit in your life too. Special thanks to our lovely, wonderful guest, Bob Culhan. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks for having me.